Krista, let's go ahead and get started. I'll keep letting people in to promote them to panelists.
Yeah, awesome. Good morning, everyone. How are you? My name is Trista Carter. It's wonderful to see a couple of familiar faces. Hi, everyone. I am with California Forward. I'm a regional stewardship manager, so I'm excited to see you guys again. And we'll just get started for the Surf Orange County HRTC meeting today. So go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat and say hello. State the organization you're with. Hola a todos que están aquí hoy. Si usted es una hispanohablante, por favor, puedes logo. I'm sorry, I don't see the translation. Oh, sorry. Debajo bajo de la pantalla puedes escribir en español. En el chat también puedes. Hay un globo. There we go. Sorry. Se dice closed caption, así se puede tener la información en español también. En unos minutos va a tener a Ismael Herrera que se va a ayudar con la traducción. Si puedes poner sus comentarios en el chat también y podemos darle su oportunidad de hablar. All right, so we will have an opportunity to have public comments for non-HRTC members. So if you have anything that you would like to share, go ahead and do so. You can raise your hand or drop it in the chat. Okay. And I know a couple people are coming in. Seeing that there's none, we'll move right on along to HRTC comments and updates with the members. So if you have any program updates or activities that's related to the principles and values of SURF, go ahead and share with us as well. All right. And seeing there is none. All right, so we'll move right on swiftly into your agenda packet for common occupations for OC's immigrant populations. Do we have the slides?
Yeah, well, Dr. Walrod and Dr. CJ Bishop will take that part over.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
okay.
I just shared.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Krista. I'll kick it off and then let's see if it's not letting me go to full screen here. There we go. So we had a request, I think, either last HRTC meeting or the one prior, to look at what are the industries that most disinvested community members and immigrant workers are work in. Unfortunately, that's not really, that data isn't really available at the geographic level that we need it at. So we actually looked at occupations. And we compared that to four, there are sort of four comparisons here. There's what that looks like at the overall countywide level. There's what that looks like at in the disinvested community level. And then within Orange County, I think it was 35%, census tracts that had 35% or greater immigrant residents. We have that comparison, and then we have the same comparison, a subset of the disinvested communities, which are have that higher than the bar we set for immigrant populations. So, CJ, I don't know if you want to just walk through this very briefly.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for giving that overview. So, what we wanted to do is we wanted to look at by the different census tracts and the communities that made those up, really what were the big different occupations in there. So we're starting with occupation groups. This is a broad categorization. So what we're seeing here in our first column is really with county over wide, our management, business sciences, and arts are the largest component of contributing to occupations within those living in the region, and then, across the board. No matter who you are, that's kind of where it is, and it's quite high, almost at 45%. And then drops to service at 22%, and sales and occupation. Going to our disadvantaged communities, we see a shift in that. While there still is a predominant role, disinvested communities, there's still a prominent role within management and business associated, it goes down to 25%. We see an uptick in service occupations and a noticeable uptick in both sales and production. So we can see really where the shift becomes redistributed in the other categories.
And construction as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, and construction. Yes, yeah, you'll see, just under 5%, which was, almost like, just almost double from what it previously was. So it's a noticeable jump as well. Thank you for highlighting that. And as we go through, we just see the shift from the immigrant population where we don't see as much, again, with the management, but the overall uptick when it comes to sales and office occupations, same thing with production. And then also we get a little bit more of an uptick on natural resources and construction. And lastly, when we collaborate with those from immigrant populations that also live in disinvested communities, we see it, almost half of what management was, and we see a bit of an uptick in service, but a noticeable uptick when it comes to sales and offices, as well as production, transportation, and materials, and then lastly, the highest growth when it comes to natural resources, construction, and maintenance occupations.
And then we also looked at the top 10 occupations in each of those. And I'm sorry, we couldn't fit this all on one slide. So we might have to toggle back and forth. But Cesar, do you want to just briefly?
Sure. We're just looking at the, so this is where the other group looked at the top groupings of occupations. This is the segmented out occupations that may nestle within, that do nestle within those different occupational groups. So when we're looking at the occupations of those in disinvested communities, looking at the top 10, we have office and admin support at the very top, followed by production, occupations, and sales. Those are all near 10% or above, and then we start dripping a little below 10%, but still predominant with food preparation and service, our building and groundskeeping and maintenance, and then construction is still very prominent there, as well as management. And then we get below the 5%, but still within the top 10 when it comes to materials and moving, healthcare support, and then also lastly, which was a previous big number, but the business and financial operations, well, it does lead into the big business category type. Within that community, you're really seeing more of a prominent recognition within this community with office and admin support, and then production occupations.
And then here's how that looks for the other three categories that we looked at, the other three groups.
Yeah, we tried to just have a comparison. It's kind of a lot to take in, which is why you have it all. But you could just see really where, like for instance, the management occupations, we start with that journey, how that dips. Overall, we have 12.8% in the first column. Then it drips to number 3, adoption number 3, excuse me, with the OC primary immigrant communities, and then it drops down yet again to management was at number 5 within OC immigrant and disinvested communities, and we'll see within the immigrant and disinvested communities, office and admin support really still maintaining the largest, with noticeable changes in kind of shifting of priorities of where the roles are, with food and preparation services being number 4 with those in disinvested and immigrant, and then building and groundskeeping at 9.77%. So those you can really see, even though there's a lot to look at, you can see that shifting as we look from overall, and even within the immigrant population as they go into this disinvested community where certain occupations climb up to higher roles.
Perfect. Thanks, CJ. Hi, Tony. I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thank you for doing this work. Really super interesting. I'm wondering if you can help us do a crosswalk between industries, which we're going to be voting on later, and how these occupations become embedded within NASICs. I wasn't able to attend your briefings, but I did listen to both of them. And so it seems like construction and extraction occupations, just starting as the first thing I'm looking at, those seem to be in 2 different NASICs groups. And it seemed like in the discussions, but if you look at the top, management occupations, is that in that professional and business services? So as I said, can you give us some help in understanding how do we then apply this into the NASICs piece so that we can be prepared for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So yeah, unfortunately with NAICS, it's not available. It's available by business location, but then we don't know where the workers come from. So this is a much better way of doing it. For some occupations, they're spread kind of across the board. Like management would be in a lot of different NAICS. It would be in every one, really. But others, like as you said, construction or healthcare, those occupations are very predominantly just within that industry sector. So it's a food prep, another one where that's predominantly within one sort of NAICS code. But there are the more spread out ones or generalized ones like management and office that are in a lot of different ones. There is a NAICS for management companies, but management is much broader than that. And we can bring back maybe some, probably have to be countywide data that crosswalks those two. But I think you get a pretty good idea from this, really. These would be fairly subsumed within NAICS, so you could crosswalk these especially well, I think.
I'm wondering if we could
Good
maybe
question.
get some bullets. It seems to me this is going to be a key question that's asked. How did you account for the immigrant population in the selection for catalysts and then later for the strategies in part 2? And I think what you said was great, but probably we want to have something written down that while occupation level, we decided not to do NAICS level, we did occupation, and these, and maybe 3 or 4 bullets that kind of, and I think you've done this in other pieces quite well in explaining what is our theory of research or our approach, so that we would literally be able to explain that this is where people could look and see how that came about. Because I, as I said, it is really interesting.
Thank you. Great point. We have started to work on that narrative text. And our plan is to, incorporate this into the regional plan part 1 when we do the final submission to the state. But we have started on that and look forward to sharing that with you. But I do think it tells a very interesting story.
State Wallace, may I add something?
Sure.
This idea of finding an overlay, occupations, industries, and then the sort of socioeconomic characteristics of the workers is a huge undertaking. I've tried to do that on a couple of occasions for projects. And so what we have are these interlocking pieces of a puzzle, but we don't have the kind of overlay that ideally you're looking for, Tony, that kind of helps us to understand more with greater precision what kind of occupations among the disinvested communities line up with the industries in the disinvested communities, such that we can actually target the industries. It's the data comes from different sources, and the alignment just isn't there at this time.
I think one of the things that for the American Indian Chamber of Commerce that we've been very sensitive about is not necessarily that you're going to have perfect data sets that do the perfect overlay, but that there's really kind of definitive transparency to say, okay, we don't, a statement, we can't do X, so this is what we did, and these are links to the sources, and then to the extent there are strengths or weaknesses to combining, because sometimes there are things you should never combine. I think that's really a piece that we look at, and of course, American Indians really come in at these like 1.2 and almost always less than 2% of stuff. So understanding the proxy that we're essentially using is important. So it's in no way I totally acknowledge, and I think you're correct, but for us, we would love to be able to see, okay, so what did we do? We're very sensitive to labels of like, this is good jobs. We would rather have something that says, these are jobs that provide these qualities. And so I know we all want to be, we've all tried to work in charts, and so that's why understanding, like, for instance, your disinvested Orange County overall doesn't include Native American or California Native American tribes, I'm guessing, because it doesn't, it's a definition that is not actually found in your federal statistics. So I'm guessing you couldn't have included it. So I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying it's the transparency of understanding we can only do what we can do. But for groups that are often excluded, we just want to know, oh, are we in there? Or are we not in there? Not because somebody's done a bad job at all. It's not a criticism.
Oh, thanks. No, I didn't take it at all that way. And we'll do the best that we can. We have a start on the write-up, and happy to incorporate those points into it. So thank you very much, Tony. I appreciate that. And I appreciate, your perspective and where that's coming from. So thank you.
And if I could just add one thing too, I think really hearing what you're saying, Tony, is I think it's also important as we look and provide more context, and we'll definitely write it out, is not just necessarily look at the occupations, but knowing the skill sets associated with those occupations and the skills of the communities that we're serving. So I think as we look at this, as you're saying, like, really, where are these paths? It's completely understanding and respecting the incredible work these communities already have and what they as individuals develop, and just saying how, based on your skills, does it best seem to navigate for you based on whatever your objectives may be.
Exactly. These are all just tools that we're providing to the HRTC to be able to really understand what we're finding on the research side, and then be able to make the decisions that you're going to be making. Let's see, is there another hand raised?
Looks like Nate.
Yes, thanks. So I was looking at the first slide here that I think this is, yes, the first slide is in front of us here. On the categories on the far right, well, for all three of the categories, disinvested Orange County overall percentage, OC primarily immigrant communities percentage, and OC immigrant disinvested communities percentage. How are income levels of those groups taken into consideration for these statistics, if at all, or if there's any insight you all can offer in regards to income levels?
Are you talking about between those four groups or between the occupational groups? The four geographic groups or the four occupational?
Between the three geographic groups specifically, because we're looking for disinvested communities. And so I was curious to know, at least in those three categories of disinvested, specifically the two disinvested Orange County and the OC immigrant disinvested communities, if there is any.
There's differences between the income levels? Is that your question?
No, how the income levels were distributed within these categories, if that was taken into consideration at all.
CJ, go ahead.
Yeah, so really if we're talking about just about the location, how it's determined. So the immigrant populations, as Dr. Walrod explained earlier, was really based off of the predominance of identified immigrant populations within census tract groups. The disinvested populations was an overlay based on criteria which did include income, as it is related to the work done by Mapping Black California. That organization had provided earlier on. We want to build off the knowledge we have about different sections of communities that may be experiencing different challenges greater than others. And income is a factor of that. So that's really where it's nestled within the disinvested communities. Since it is spatially informed, if there is, and Nate, maybe I just want to make sure I'm ensuring I'm not making assumptions on the questions you're asking. If there's a more beyond what's being identified that was previously created by Mapping Black California for the defined disinvested communities, if there's something more finite you're looking for, I just want to make sure that that's being addressed if for the income levels, but it is within previously identified methods. I just want to make sure your specific question is being answered.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
CJ.
Yeah, and I would just
Yeah.
one more thing, sorry, to see is that so the definition of disinvested community and that income threshold is from the state. So we
Right.
are using the state's definition. Part of that is income level. When we say disinvested community, that is the criteria we are using. The one that the state has told us to use, if that helps.
Exactly.
Minus American Indians,
And I
Yes,
want
thank
California
you.
Native
Yes.
American tribes.
Yes, thank you, Tony. Correct.
we have Linda and Adine, and then we'll be able to move on to our next item.
Thank you, Trista. I just, for clarification then for me, what we're looking at, based on what you were saying earlier, CJ, is we're looking at, this is existing data. So when you talk about these are where the disinvested community individuals are working currently, where the immigrant populations are nestled currently. And then this informs us so that once we arrive at industry sectors, and particular job functions that fuel those sectors, we can move the needle. So some of these percentages are going to be baselines for us. Am I understanding that correctly? This is just informing us of where we're starting out.
Yes, that's one of the ways this can be used, but this is an example where we're responding directly to a request from some of the HRTC members to pull this data. And it can be used the way you said, but it can be used probably differently by different members of the HRTC. That's why the different perspectives of the HRTC are important.
Understood. Thank you.
Hi, Dean Foreman. Go ahead and take yourself off mute.
Thank you. So to go to what Tony just said about good jobs, the state under the workforce programs has two labels. They have the High Road Training Partnerships and the High Road Construction Careers. They're called the HRTP and HRTC, which they have labeled as those are certain types of good jobs that the state uses to designate different types of programs. And it's in all the workforce programs. So I just want to draw attention to that because many of these classifications of jobs fall under that. And that is something the state has put a large amount of investment in workforce. So when we talk about jobs, I think that's something important to mention.
Good point.
Thank you for adding that in. We'll make sure to consider that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. I want to go ahead and move us along to our next section. And this is regarding the industry selection for catalyst funding. This is an actionable item to vote to select industries that will receive the catalyst funding. Of course, this will be up for discussion. I'm going to introduce Matt Horton, and he'll be speaking over this next section.
Thanks, Trista. It's really an honor to be a part of this conversation, and not to confuse us too much, but I think when we talk about industries, I think it's important that we back up a bit in terms of what's our intentionality around that. And I think there's two ways really to talk about industry formation, industry reshoring, and our intentionality on encouraging or incentivizing those sectors either through government action, local community-based action, to encourage those industries to come to Orange County, invest, create jobs and businesses there. But there's also, from a Milk Institute standpoint, we like to talk about like resilient growth and how we encourage that, and it's through talent and how we invest in ourselves and how we invest in economic mobility and through the talent pipeline. And I think that's really important here. And when we look at the state from like a STEM or a STEAM standpoint, we know that certain fields in architecture, engineering, biotech, agriculture, agricultural disciplines and environmental sciences and things, those fields tend to make way higher percentages than arts and humanities and education. So when we think about how we're going to invest in public dollars in terms of industries and the types of economic mobility and opportunities that we want to see, I think the governance around how we're investing in the talent pipeline and investing in economic mobility is kind of key there. And I think there's really two great models that I've come across in doing this work that really highlight that intentionality. And I guess I'll just put them in the chat if that works. One is the Greater Washington Partnership and their CoLab initiative, which is a regional initiative in Baltimore and Maryland, in Virginia and Washington, D.C., that is, they call it the nation's leading tech employment hub that brings together employers across all industries, from government and healthcare to the arts and energy, to hire workers from an array of educational backgrounds and that with the intent to succeed in today's more increasing digital economy. And I think that's like a governance kind of collaboration model on that intentionality. But I think also with more investment, San Antonio's Ready to Work program is a $200 million program, which was funded by a 1/8 cent sales tax, which really creates a conduit for local employers to support a program in perpetuity that provides guidance related to in-demand, well-paid occupations and relevant training. And I think, for our benefit, a lot of the work there is already done in terms of looking at what the industries they've kind of circled around. And I think for us, a lot of those industries really line up well with aerospace, energy, manufacturing, architecture, finance and insurance, professional services, construction, healthcare, skilled trades, education, information technology and cybersecurity, transportation and logistics. I think the programmatic investment that San Antonio has made provides certification, bachelor's degrees, associate's degrees, kind of through that whole spectrum, starting at 18 years old, all the way like through different stages of the workforce. And I think that kind of intentionality around investment in the talent pipeline is something that looks a lot like a jobs first surf programmatic effort that we should be thinking about. So I'll put some of these links in the chat, and I have some of the data that I was talking about around skills and incomes that kind of align with that, kind of support some of these things, and I think really support some of the comments that were made earlier around how do we operationalize or create an intentionality around the how we're investing, especially through the talent pipeline and through skills.
Any feedback or any comments? Okay, so hearing there are none. Jesse, do we have a polling?
No. Yeah. So okay. At this point in time, right, because everyone has the data, this is the opportunity for all of you to kind of provide your input and your perspective and an open discussion, before assuming you move forward with it, kind of wanting to select the industries, or at least release the poll, and we'll have a week to select. So you guys have all the research and the data, but you guys are here from all your relative perspectives. Now I guess this is your opportunity to bring your interpretation of the data to discuss amongst your colleagues on what industries probably could be important for us to select for Catalyst. That's the primary bulk of this next 30 minutes or so, if it takes 30 minutes. So with that, this goes to you. Would you like to share kind of your perspectives on what you've seen in the data and what you think we should invest in for Catalyst funding? Okay, because I mean, if we move forward, we are going to vote. So is there anyone have any points of discussion or points they'd like to make prior to us releasing the poll? And yeah, so we're going to have, for the sake of inclusivity, some people can't make this call. It's not as if you can't make it, therefore you can't vote. So we will drop the link and we'll close it, end of day in a week. I think it is. Yeah, so that is what we will, so we will allow this opportunity for people to digest the information further. If you still have more questions, I'm sure we'll be available to answer them prior to Friday, and we'd want to make sure that all of you can cast your vote.
Awesome. We have
Jesse,
Fry,
Yes.
Santa Ana, and then Tony. And so we have a couple of hands raised. So Linda, go ahead first. And then Thrive.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm surprised that everybody isn't chiming in on this, because this is just such an important thanks for your overview on some of those models, Matt. But I wanted to make sure that it was noted that Jones Lang LaSalle, who's very top researchers do data search on life sciences and technology, There are two things I wanted to mention. One of them was Jones Lang LaSalle just released that the Orange County area, Orange County is the #1 med tech cluster in the nation. I mean, beating the second place by a lot. So we wanted to make sure that that was sort of helping to inform decisions, because I'm one of those people that does not wish to reinvent the wheel. What I want to do is make those industry sectors and clusters even stronger, because I think they're 21st and 22nd century job opportunities, and then find ways to fuel that with education and skills talent. Second thing was the tech hotspots. And this is technology as opposed to being specifically health tech or healthcare related. But they're white hot technology spots. So in other words, we're very high on that tech development as well, which has a wide scope of job opportunities too. So, but they need to be fueled, which is what you're hearing from Matt. And that's where I think our biggest opportunity is. But I just want to make sure those two things are noted. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and
I think it's also on the back of that. Sorry to jump in. I think we should remember the investments that we made in some of those, like in some of that curriculum, going back to the Doing What Matters initiative, which gave us, $250 million to prop up regional STEM curriculum development. And I think what we're lacking there, or what we see is lacking, is kind of like the place-based investment scenario around that. Like, how do we take curriculum to employment? And I think that takes the intentionality that we're seeing here from a skills to employment kind of scenario. We need some kind of programmatic heft to be that kind of conduit to employers and employment and opportunities.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kind of piggyback off of that comment. I do I've heard a few comments, even in our meeting last week. There was some suggestion that we need to have a strong criteria to guide not just our selection of industries, but also what are going to be our expectations or strategies within whichever industries or sectors we select. So I'm kind of hoping to start the conversation from that perspective, and maybe state the obvious, that we want to make sure that whatever industries and sectors we select are meeting the goals of SURF, to benefit disinvested communities, and consider the environment, and consider addressing historical inequities. So yeah, I think it would be good to include that in our conversation as well. How are we making sure that we're addressing those?
Yeah. I think it's such a great point. Like, from a historical standpoint, especially Southern California's economy in terms of its tech, how Southern California's incubated tech and what industries those tend to be has been, aerospace and some digital, industrial design, and biotech. So, like, starting from a position of strength around this infrastructure and seeing how we can grow that, I think is a great question for us to figure out how we can solve for that from an investment standpoint, but also from a potential growth, like into areas of increasing manufacturing opportunities, and what supply chain linkages need to be made from there. Those are infrastructure questions, and they complement talent investment questions as well.
I just want to take a moment to reiterate. There's Emily has dropped in the chat the link to the survey, but however, prior to voting, this group collectively will need a motion and a second to make the vote. But the information of the proposed industries is in the chat. Emily, do you mind dropping it in one more time? And then also it's a listing of the breakdown, a link in that survey with a listing of the breakdown of the industries. Okay, go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
Can I add one more piece to my comment before moving on? Just one of the criteria that I feel could be helpful, and I see Austin's hand up, and I'm eager to hear what you all have to share. But one thing that I've heard a lot from our union brothers and sisters is the difference that organizing makes. And I feel like labor has provided a really powerful examples of the difference that can be made through direct decision making and participation of workers in different sectors, and I think there's a few different sectors that are represented by labor here, and I would suggest that we kind of use that as the model. How can we use organizing as a model to improve access and improve equity in different sectors, and in different industries. I've mentioned it in some of the stakeholder meetings, but one for example, there's a lot of low-income workers that work in food, making food, and also working in restaurants and kitchens and things like that. There's a lot of domestic work that happens that is often unseen in our economy. And how do we uplift the direct participation and decision making of domestic workers to to have just wages, things like that. So I'd like to see some criteria along those lines included, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Good. My comments are complementary to that. I don't know if it would be okay if I jump in after that.
Sure. Let's go ahead and get Tony and Jasmine first, and then we'll go on down to the next.
Got it. Thank you.
So I have four recommendations as we looked at the various pieces of data. One would be to identify 5 sectors or whatever the maximum amount that is reasonably accommodated, and to use the very highest level of industry sectors to provide the greatest amount of flexibility. I'm not in any way challenging the idea that med tech cluster in Orange County is the largest in the nation. But another one of our recommendations is to underscore that the Catalyst work is intended to bring workers and businesses in disinvested communities to the priority industries and the supply chains of priority industries. Our third recommendation, and this is in no particular order, there's a variety of industry sectors, and I'll put our recommendations in the chat there. We wrote them. We would encourage, as we looked at it, healthcare, manufacturing, energy. Although energy didn't show up a lot, we do need to be transitioning to a net zero powered economy. So healthcare, manufacturing, energy, information technology, and then the importance of business and professional services, because it supports all of the various elements. And then we also, our fourth item is to ensure that the support of small businesses within these sectors is mentioned explicitly in the application, and that the cluster analysis section of the report, we had a designation of something called business and entrepreneurship listed, but it's not really a NASIC sector, so we didn't really know how to incorporate that. So those would be our 4 recommendations, and I will put that in the chat.
Thank you, Tony. Jasmine?
Great. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for all this great work, Jesse and team. I think as I'm thinking about it, it's really resonating what Linda said, right? Obviously about tech sector and med device sector of like, how do we build on our strengths and make it a very clear purpose of this catalyst funding to get more from disinvested communities into those jobs and roles, because I think we'll all agree they're completely underrepresented. And this is an opportunity for us to get people into those middle and higher paying jobs. I think the other kind of criteria that I'm using, people have already said it, right? Like the energy or the impact on environment, access to the middle, like, is it actually an industry that leads to middle and higher paying jobs? And I think the other kind of criteria that I'm putting a lens on is around diversification. I think that's Orange County's strength. And so there might be some, if I think about healthcare, I think there are opportunities to get into middle and higher paying jobs, but much of the need is really around some of the lower paying jobs like home healthcare aides. I think it's in some of the research we've done is the occupation that shows up the most. But for many in disinvested community, that still is a step up from where they might be now. So to me, like diversifying and building upon that strength in OC will be important. And you guys have kind of just heard like the couple of sectors that we would vote for. So thanks. That's all I wanted to share.
Commissioners, I believe you said Austin was next.
Yes, sorry, Austin, and then Tiffany, Melanie, Gary, and then Adine.
Good morning. This is Austin from Unite Here. So I'd like to argue for accommodation in food services, which we usually call hospitality and food services. But people have been talking about the ability to move into good jobs, which I totally agree with, and accessibility to immigrants. The domestic work, informal economy jobs, at food stands, all kinds of things are in a continuum with hotel jobs. A person, a longtime citizen, a new immigrant can access those jobs and move up in that sector from an under the table cash job where there may be a lot of wage theft, a lot of abuse, to a job making $30 an hour with full family health care and a pension. And people are doing that right now. Accommodation in food service, whether we like it or not, is an industry that our public entities are investing in furiously to expand as many jobs as they possibly can. And it's a big question whether those jobs will be towards the lower end or the higher end. But there's not that much of a question, that the industry is going to expand furiously. I think that this money, can be SURF investments can be really well spent to help more of the folks who most need access to those good jobs to be the ones to get apprenticeships to learn the fine dining cooking skills to move up into the best paying jobs. Because of unionization, which provides immigrant protections in our contracts, even the very best high-end jobs are available to immigrants of all kinds. So this is with investment, with resources, this is an industry where you can quickly change your life. Sodexo workers at Disney just got a $5 an hour wage increase. That's $10,000 more in their pockets every year. That's life-changing. And that, helping people get into those jobs is important work. We happen to have the best food service and accommodation training organization in the country in our backyard, which is the HTA. So we have an incredible opportunity that really is not available anywhere else in the country to invest in apprenticeships, which already exist in LA and could exist in Orange County, for justice-involved people, for immigrants, for all kinds of communities that have not been fully included in the best jobs, to be able to move up. So I would, if you're looking for a place where people can, which is dynamic and growing, and where immigrants, excluded communities can really move up, accommodation and food services is a top industry.
Thank you, Austin, for sharing. Tiffany, then Melanie, and then just to be aware of timing, we have a few more minutes to share on this topic before the group collectively can motion whether or not they would like to vote on making these selecting industries.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. I know I've been extremely quiet on these calls, and I think I'm just trying to absorb as much as I absolutely can, because this is definitely not something that I'm used to learning about. But I think I would be amiss if I didn't actually talk a little bit about childcare and the impact that childcare actually has on the workforce. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily something that needs to be funded by the Catalyst or put forth for necessarily the industry itself, but from an infrastructure standpoint, if childcare is not looked at, we know just based by our data and what we've seen, people cannot enter into the workforce for families. And so I just kind of wanted to throw that out there from a perspective of, we understand in Orange County that there's a lack of childcare. We understand that families are struggling to afford childcare, but then also struggling to get back into the workforce. And so just kind of wanted to throw that out there and have you guys think a little bit about what that infrastructure looks like as we think about putting industries and supporting our workforce here in Orange County.
Thank you. Great point. Melanie, and then Gary.
Hi, I'm in the car right now, sitting in a parking lot. So can you confirm that you hear me?
Yep, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I too feel like I am trying to learn a new topic, and so forgive me if I'm a little off base here, but I feel like there may be a strategic move that instead of focusing on industries that are already successful, diversifying across the spectrum where more investment could raise other boats in the lake of Orange County's job and economic and environmental sectors might be a strong move, so that if there's an impact, and I'll use construction since that's an easy example, if the cost of concrete or asphalt or wood or metal changes in such a way that building slows down, that sector is going to take a hit that we may or may not be able to foresee. But ultimately, I think the key word that comes to my mind is diversifying and trying to raise some of the boats that haven't historically been raised. The other thing I want to ask is our goal to invest in things that are already successful, or is it to diversify the workforce and the trainings so that new industries can be successful? And that might be rhetorical, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
No worries. No, that's a great point. And I just want to add that construction is added into the industry sector list that can be selected as an option. All right, Gary, and then Adine.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I too, a lot of this is new to me. And I certainly echo what Melanie is saying. You know, one of the things is when I see these data sets, it promotes and sustains the silos of everything. And everything is in a silo. We look at the various occupations and they're in silos. You know, and of course, I represent the environment, as many do, but the environment crosses all of those silos. And, you know, numerically, we're always going to be a small group and will be marginalized. I get that. But when you look at what makes Orange County different than Merced County, what makes Orange County different than Kern County, it's our natural resources, it's our coast, our harbors, it's our open space, it's the quality of life. Why did Chipotle a couple of years ago move their headquarters from Denver or from Colorado to 2 floors of a high-rise at Fashion Island with spectacular views for their employees? I mean, there's an attraction. Why is the OC the OC? It's the environment that crosses all of these lines and all of these silos. And so, you know, it's easy to marginalize it, but I think there's a lot of very smart people who are trying to figure this out and how we go. But if we go on the track we're going, the environment will always be marginalized because numerically we don't compete. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. That's some great points and talking about that. Just with respect to time, we're going to do a Dean, Anna, and I see your hand, Krista, and that would be final comments.
Thanks. Just to Gary's point, in many of the grants the states puts out, you have to have climate resiliency in it. And so in, for example, hospitality, our grants include things like how to like teaching cooks how to avoid food waste, and then we do a lot of safety and sanitation, how to clean properly, teaching housekeepers how to use chemicals properly so that they don't destroy the environment, how to dispose properly of chemicals. So I think there is the environmental programming throughout a huge amount of sectors. I do want to say, and I want to bring this back again to labor. Labor is a mandated partner in SURF for a reason. And I think that we need to make sure that the sectors chosen are those where there are labor management partnerships, where we can take as Austin said, folks who are veterans, foster youth, transgender, justice involved, homeless, whatever it is, and move them into low income jobs. Move them into jobs that you might consider as low income compared to tech. But the truth is that with a union fighting for them, they start turning into good jobs, right? If they're in a union location. And you have a career pathway, whether you start as entry level and can move up from even culinary to director of food and beverage to hotel general manager. In these large hotels, we have that. It is the perfect place for immigrants. Many of our kitchens have a wide variety of folks in there that speak all kinds of languages because they cooked in their home country, and we train them to put them in good jobs. The last thing I just want to say is we were selected for a DOL grant for a critical sector grant to take our program nationwide. And I think Orange County, which also, to Gary's point, that makes it so unique, is not just the environment, but it has Disneyland, it has Knott's Berry Farm, it has many of these tourist places that can't be found other places except possibly Florida. So we should really make sure that as we look at immigrants, we look at those jobs, not just ones where you need to speak fluent English, but ones that you can come in as an immigrant and move up career ladders. Thanks.
Dean, sorry to interrupt. Can you sharpen that point a little bit as it relates to this context of these industries? As we look at these industries, per your comment, it seems like some have better infrastructure or partnerships for labor to get involved. And so what would some of those look like? I'm assuming accommodation and food services, as you just referenced, but perhaps you can cite a few others, as this is part of our education, I think, as well.
Sure. I mean, in my mind, the building and construction trades is the gold standard in apprenticeship. I know somebody just spoke to it. I mean, obviously, I think they are a big part of every economy that we deal with. So I would say, obviously, that because we hugely support their efforts. And then the other thing is healthcare, which I know that Tony put on the list. Healthcare has many union, workers from depends on what the place is, but obviously nurses, doctors, and many of the different job classifications within healthcare. I assume In manufacturing, there is union jobs in Orange County, although I don't know how many there are, and I don't know who we would partner with to make sure that when you put people in manufacturing, there are career pathways in that. Energy also could be one, but I don't know. But I would say those are the main sectors where you have training components in them that move people into those good jobs. Hospitality, food service, building and construction trades, and healthcare.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Adine. Moving on to Anna and then Krista.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I'd want to support some of the things that we've heard already. Like I support accommodation and food services as one of the priority industries. Also, that labor and organizing will be necessary to make the difference in any of the sectors. I definitely support childcare as an important industry that enables and makes possible work for everyone. And then the diversifying sectors comment, I really appreciate it too, because I'm thinking about not just the industries that can bring disinvested community members into them, but the industries where disinvested community members are, and raising the standards of those industries, like through training and apprenticeship programs, like we're saying, through organizing, through worker ownership. So there's plenty of strategies that would be important, but I would say not to focus just on like I think I mentioned it before when we had the presentation of the, cream of the crop industries, or the ones that, were resilient around the pandemic. Like, can we also pick some that weren't? So yeah, I agree with the idea of diversifying the industries.
Awesome. And we'll go ahead and bring Krista, and then we'll move on to our next topic.
Yeah, thanks. Just real quick, kind of to echo what Tiffany and some others have said, I'm trying to understand all the different perspectives. And just two main questions kind of jumped to my head in making this decision. One, kind of, how do we choose industries relative to the costs of developing pipelines into the industries, right? So a bunch of folks have mentioned construction and healthcare, which of course, given my work at Hope Builders, I support, but I also know that I guess I'm wondering where are we most likely to have success and what industries will lead to that, because either of systems that are already in place or just relative cost to developing pipelines into those industries. I had a third point and then I just completely lost my train of thought. So I'll leave it at that.
No worries. Thank you for that feedback. Those are great points to consider and think about for this group. If Jesse, did you want to put it on the table to allow for the group to either open it up for the week to vote on industries, or how would you like to proceed with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we would have to have a motion in a second. I would say open the window for the selection of industries. We will then drop that link, and as I mentioned, it's already there, but we will email everyone for those who aren't able to participate, and then we'll close it in a week. So I would just need a motion in a second to something similar to that for us to essentially open the poll and start the voting.
This is Kathy.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, Adine.
I'll make a motion to open the poll to start the voting.
And Kathy Boyd will second it.
Perfect. Thank you. So Emily did drop in a chat one more time. Perfect. Thank you. She's on it. So that is the link. Again, there is reference in the list of industries. So if you need clarification on the breakdown of what each industry comprise of, the link is there inside of the form. And it will be open for the week and close, I believe, next Friday, and to allow for those who are not able to attend to participate as well.
And then also one last thing, sorry, Trista, just that, right, if it's still unclear, if you kind of are thinking more from an occupational lens, like feel free to email me and Dr. Walrod, and we can try to clarify that in case, like, we try to make it as easy as possible by allowing those other links where you can kind of compare, but if there's still confusion, we'll try our best to answer that so you're not selecting an industry by mistake. So use that week as well to utilize that.
Awesome, perfect.
And
Okay.
Jesse and Trista, sorry, this is Josefa. I thought I'm still on chapter 1 while everyone else is on chapter 10. And for those like myself, I do want to call out what Jesse and Dr. Walrod clarified in the comment, just so we know what this whole purpose is behind this voting. And ultimately, the 5 industries that are selected within this survey are the 5 industries that we could be invested in within the Catalyst funding. But that does not preclude industries outside of those 5 from getting supported during implementation phase. Just making sure that we all know that.
Yes, 100% correct.
Great interpretation, Josefa. That was perfect. Okay, so moving on to the outreach and engagement findings. This last component, I'll hand it over to Jesse.
Yeah, so we have our presenters. So Sarah and CJ, if you jump on or start sharing your screen, this is kind of the beginning as we move towards the development of strategies that we've done significant outreach and engagement, and they'll tell you kind of all the work that they've done. But kind of to Luis's point, right, when it comes to implementation, we need to develop strategies, and then we will find projects that fit within those strategies. So this is the first blush of what residents have said about what they feel are going to be useful strategies, what's impacting them as we start thinking about these strategies. So we're not presuming kind of what disinvested communities need, but we have a strong kind of data set that we can start basing these decisions off of. So that sets the stage here. We're kind of moving towards the conversation of strategy development, with the very first step being, well, what does the community think? Or what does the community need? What are their assets? And what do they think we should be doing when it comes to surf? So with that, I'll hand over to CJ and Sarah.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sarah Middleton, and I'm going to kick off this piece of our meeting. I'm going to go lightning fast because I want you all to have enough time to hear from CJ, who has the excellent analysis and findings to share. In my role with SURF, I have been honored and privileged to serve as the outreach and engagement consultant. And I think you're aware by now, but we had 27 grantees who were focused on outreach and engagement between the months of July and September. Collectively, these organizations outreached to a little more than 285,000 unduplicated individuals across Orange County. And this was our timeline. I'm not going to read any of these slides. You have them in your meeting packet. And at any point, if you have questions about the process or any of the activities that took place, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat. This is a little bit about outreach, the languages that outreach were conducted in, and then the locations that outreach was also conducted in. So you can see we covered a lot of ground with these 27 grantees. And I should mention too, of the 285,000 individuals that were outreached to, about 13,000 of those folks were high quality, meaning that our grantees received direct input and feedback from them. These were some of the outreach mechanisms that were used. Grantees got super creative in soliciting feedback and input from individuals around Orange County. So this was a phenomenal community activation effort up and down our region. I'll close with just some photos. Again, you've got all of this in your packet. And now I'm sure for the information you've been waiting for, what did all of the outreach and engagement efforts tell us? So over to CJ for that.
Thank you. And then as I get ready to share my screen, huge kudos to Sarah and all those who participated, the community members, and also those who helped coordinate it. It was fantastic. So thank you all for that. So this is a portion of all the things. So I'm giving you like kind of the highlights for time's sake for this meeting. But I'm going to go through some of the primary findings, and then there will also be a larger document shared that has more robust finding with all the questions. So just to give you an idea, this is the distribution of the different participants. and who's involved regarding that. So for each of my screens, I'm going to identify an N, just so you're aware. So the actual number of unduplicated headcounts will be on each of the screens to identify that for that. And then we have here by percentage, the variety of participants by organization. I'm also, for the record, just going to go through this relatively efficiently because what we have to cover, but obviously there will be space for questions or any follow-up. But I just want to provide a distribution. Obviously, Viet Rise at the very top with a lot of, they have 13.56% with a large contribution with OC Hispanic COC, and the BPSOS are those above top, above 10%, but we have quite a few involved. Also get an idea, this is one aspect. We have other demographic information, but again, we're kind of focusing for sake of time. This is just the idea for those participants who chose to respond. So some of these questions, you'll see why is this number a little lower. If we had information from participants and they responded, this is in there. If not, those numbers obviously aren't included because we don't have a response. So within those who contributed, the community members, we have a majority at under $25,000 for household income that they responded to, and also 24% who prefer not to say. So as far as the known, the under 25,000 was the largest representation, followed by the known information set of those between 25 and 50 at 18. Over 100,000, we have 15%, and then below between 50 and 75 at 11, and then 75 and 100,000 at 8%. So now we're going to highlight some of the questions that will respond to the responses we got. So we'll go through those. And again, this is a sample of the overall survey. So what is or are your occupations? List more than one. If applicable, if you're in a school, list student. Out of the 4,156 responded, the largest representation by far was over 25% were students. So a lot of those were students who either were solely students or were students in some sort of capacity with maybe a role they served. And that could be professional, that could be a home caretaker, but student was the largest representation. We then had homemakers, housewives, in ama de casa, as Sarah responded and identified. There's various languages. So these responses were also translated to identify and ensure that that population was considered, followed by the retired, nonprofit sector, health and education professionals, or service industry reps, admin roles, self-employed, blue collar jobs, unemployed, and other roles. And you also have a copy of this. So I'm going to, like I said, going through this quickly, but we were, you'll have what kind of responses are. If I felt like there was a little bit more information needed, those were provided. Now, in this community, it was asked, select your top 3 solutions to ensure that there are accessible high quality jobs for the most economically disadvantaged individuals and families. So our respondents were able to respond more than one time, up to 3. So you'll see a high level responses and we'll see the distribution of that. So we'll see there's actually 15,216 points because people could respond more than once. And as we can see here, a big, out of the options provided, a big take home of that was education, training, and developmental programs. That was at 28%, a large request for that. Next, followed by workplace representation and right to unionize in 19%, a high representation there. Then we go to 15% environmentally friendly projects that provide high quality. And then entrepreneurship, job placement at 13, reliable transportation at 10, and then other at 2%. Now, individuals also have the ability to provide responses when there were available. So I have a couple with some throughout this presentation that we'll just highlight as far as it maybe helped really capture what the sentiment was from those. So some response, for example, here is, we need to educate people with personal finances, which I can provide. The businesses need to learn how to protect their businesses, how to still manage at times of recession, depression, or any other economic or pandemic times. You'll see, not surprisingly, that financial support or an ability to access finance is a real big theme that we will be going across and be addressed in different questions that come across from the respondents. Another one that we looked at is select your top 3 solutions for increasing health equity in Orange County. Another one where there was people to respond multiple times, again, top 3, so we have 15,500 on this. So 26% said affordable and high quality comprehensive health care was the most representative sample that all were looking for within their top 3. That was followed by health education to support healthier lifestyles at 17%. 16% was access to services that meet specific healthcare needs. Now, even though these are beyond our top three, we still have high representation in expand collaboration and partnership between healthcare providers at 12%, 10% at more healthy healthcare professions that reflect the demographics. Also at 10 is access to caseworkers who can identify specific healthcare needs and resources. 7% is culturally sensitive care. And lastly, there is the other categorization with this specific question. A sample here, response is more capacity in healthcare networks and providers. Hospitals and nursing homes tend to be over capacity, although there was a great need for healthcare in these spaces. So that's just a reflective response from our community that really kind of reflects the answers that were provided and given. Next is, what strategies would you recommend for growing Orange County's economy in a more equitable way? So with this was open dialogue. So we got 4,523 responses. Affordable housing was very noted here. Again, anything from building more affordable homes, single and two-bedroom apartments, and also creating neighborhoods exclusively for first-time home buyers to really help protect that environment. We also have education and training, so really investing in anything from job training to teaching to concepts of business concepts, and then providing even adults, the senior or active adult training, and also for identified as disadvantaged communities as well. What rounded up the top three was support for small business and entrepreneurs, and these include not just advice but also grants or credit opportunities, also opportunities to collaborate with other entrepreneurs and really provide more education in that category type. And then we have community investments, public transport and infrastructure is big, job opportunities and fair pay, government policies, and environmental considerations are the others within these top responses available. An example of this as far as existing is the OC Board of Supervisors can place a bond measure on the ballot in November 2024 with a 2/3 majority. We need a multi-billion-dollar bond sale to fund affordable and permanent supportive housing in OC. We also need to change zoning laws to make it easier to build denser housing and ensure that every house development includes a certain percentage of housing units that are affordable to low-income and very low-income folks. So this is a sample of that. There was some incredibly robust comments that came forth that really show the need and desire from the community. So again, thanks to all those with the work involved in that. So next was, please select the three most important goals in making your high road economy vision a reality in Orange County. What those look like were, at 21%, growing industries that create high quality jobs, followed by was increasing economic equity at 20%. At 19, we have increasing health equity. 14%, we have increasing environmental equity. And then we follow at 12% with both better preparing and responding to economic shocks, and also better aligning with state climate goals, for example, clean energy, air pollution reduction, sustainable water management. And then lastly, there is the other category. Now, in this, the other respondents, we got 122 here. Affordable housing came up again, as far as a critical point for how that blends into that, including importance on access to jobs, housing accessibility, and really providing really more of an opportunity out there is really what the community is asking for those. The second item was better education, really stressed that really more access to this, critical thinking, decision making, really providing that for the community, financial stability and fair wages, climate resilience, sustainability there, as far as really helping to reduce carbon footprints, and lastly, equitable opportunities. So what that means as far as really engaging with specific communities as relates to housing, job opportunities, resources available to them. And a couple sample responses there include life skills. If individuals were better equipped for younger ages, they would be more independent, self-sufficient adults. So really kind of providing opportunities and more guidance at a core level through education system, and also invest in P16 for local resources, particularly in areas we talked about earlier with job opportunities, but STEM is in high need communities for program experiences and also enrich life of children and their families. So, as you discussed earlier, decisions you're making on occupations really blend into other aspects from these community responses. Are there underinvested occupations or talents in your community that with additional support could develop into high quality jobs? So this is a yes, no, followed by some responses on that. So actually surprising on this was no, 58% feel like there's a lacking of that support within their communities. So that really, in my mind, really led to a greater need, and we'll see that in some of the responses, with 42% saying yes. And then if yes, the question was, what occupations or talents are there? So really highlighting there. And we've got over 1,000 responses here. So I'll quickly go over the top 3. We have education and training. So really, it's really identifying teachers and tutors in the community, especially when it comes to educational technologies and supporting those. Arts and crafts is also another notable imprint as far as really helping those with these talents, help them become profitable in their businesses and support those growths with that skill set across the board. We have painters, musicians, all types of skills there. Culinary skills is another big talent. They've got chefs and individuals who really have some big talent. But the question is, how do we best support them in running those and creating businesses that support themselves and the community? Others, I'll go over to kind of wrap up the top group, were healthcare, construction, technical jobs, small business ownership, counseling and social work, childcare, community service, and also other occupations that were included, which include things like barbers, daycare workers, public speakers, and then positions in hospitality industry. Sample response here included a lot of immigrants have higher education degrees in valuable fields from their home country, but don't know how to get it certified in the US in order to work in that field, essentially untapped labor. I was just this week presenting at the Adult Ed Program Labor Conference in LA, and this was one of the huge topics within the community college system that was asked of how do we better provide educational opportunities to evaluate the skills of our community members. We also have you thought about starting your business? Yes, no. So 67% said no, with 33% saying yes. And then the responses kind of can show you really where the challenges are. If yes, what happened to your business? So a lot of it is lack of financial resources. So either the high cost of starting a business, and then also difficulty obtaining loans or financial support was a big challenge there. Additionally, lack of knowledge or support. So really how to operate, to go through this. It kind of it speaks to earlier respondents about wanting to have the educational ability to know what is resources are out there, how to really, they want to learn, they want to have a successful, but what can they learn to make sure they do have a successful business? Others included language and cultural barriers, as far as challenge, time constraints, business risk and market condition. Those are big concerns by the community. In addition to personal circumstances and family issues, businesses in progress are not yet started. So this kind of difficulty getting started up. A failed business, so having prior experience of this and how we move forward, and then just a variety of other examples, including high taxes or dealing with city. Examples here is I had the idea of starting a Mexican Salvadorian breakfast business. Unfortunately, I couldn't fully support myself financially with my businesses due to a lack of funds to start and time to dedicate to its management. The high cost of rent, lack of access to low interest loans were significant barriers. I also felt I lacked the necessary business knowledge and legal support. Eventually, I had to make that decision of shutting down. So just a small sample of what the challenges exist there. And then what is the biggest barrier you experience in starting a business? And with the options there, access to funding is, is really tried and true. It kind of goes through here with the example here with 38%. That was followed by lack of network and mentors at 16. At 15, we had complicated legal and regulations. And then we had work and family responsibilities and other. And then the last one, 5%, is bias and discrimination. And then as we look here to wrap up, would you like to be updated on how you participate in the process moving forward? So we have half the members at 4,646 that responded that want to engage. So there is a desire to move forward with this kind of support. It's just a matter of how we can best do this and help navigate it with the work that you're all doing here. And sorry, I had to through that relatively quickly, but that is it for those responses. So I appreciate you giving me the time. And again, you have copies of this, so I apologize for going through it, but I want to have respectful of your time and any questions that you all may have.
Yes, awesome. Thank you for that presentation. We're taking questions or any comments right now. So I see Josefa with your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, CJ and Sarah. There's a lot there. I kind of wanted to just comment at the outset, the fact that there was intentionality to do this work and to partner with those who have built trust in these neighborhoods to access this information. It's not always done when we try to assess what's going on in our county. So that intentionality is critical. The other thing I will mention is, as CJ was talking about some of the skill sets and some of the technical side of these individuals that were polled, let's not forget the soft skills that are behind all of this, because we talk a lot about grit in this country and how grit is the key towards success. And these folks are building grit just by mere survival in Orange County, right? The resilience, the tenacity, the resourcefulness, it's there. So behind all of these technical skills is this ability to make magic work, make it survive, help your family survive in this and potentially thrive. And so I just want to comment on that transferable skill of grit is something that shouldn't be overlooked, because they could survive in many different types of industries if the infrastructure or the pathways are available to them. So kudos to all the outreach and engagement teams for doing this work, and to this group for the intentionality to reach out and meet people where they're at, rather than just build it and hope that they will come.
Yes, that's great feedback, and thank you. This definitely is intentionality. Linda.
Thank you, Trista. And Josefa, I couldn't agree more. I am really grateful to be so well informed at the, really where the rubber meets the road. I think this is just really essential information. And to your point about the soft skills, not to pick at your words, but I've been at this with you for years. I call them now essential skills. And I think that needs to be incorporated and integrated into almost everything we do as a baseline. But I'm curious about two things. One, were we satisfied with the sample? Because there was a lot of organizations, that we commissioned to go out and collect this. Was this a satisfactory sample for us? And or if it's not, recognizing the great work, yes, but recognizing if we wanted a greater sample, do we understand now the barriers or the hurdles or the things that got in our way from getting a better sample? That's one question. I have another one.
From a data side, and I can also others chip in, this is not the full, this for sake of time, the full response of all the variety of questions. And there's also what we're putting together as a supplement, there's also 70 other documents that related to individuals having truly fantastic dialogue, conversation that really expanded beyond these. So I feel like while the survey provided a great sample and also a relatively speedy way for me to go through about this, really the rich work that we're still putting together and finalizing is coming through. And I feel like there was a lot of, and hats off to the community members who participated and those involved. There was things beyond this survey that had dialogue that provided richer context that we're also going to be bringing in as supplemental information. So I felt that was, in my mind, from looking at the data, a great response from the community at need. There was also feedback of potentially responding in other ways, a little bit more that called for the need for that individual, those focus groups, which we do have samples of. So I think there will be, when we're all said and done, there'll be a findings section that provides, if we are doing this in the future, here's specific feedback the community is asking for to get other representation. But at its core, I think it was very well done. And then we'll provide dialogue on what other findings we have where there's maybe some gaps.
And Lynn, I think,
yeah,
sorry,
I'm sorry, Jesse.
I'll just say, well, I think, CJ, well, we're kind of, cross tabulations, right? Because that was an aggregate finding. And so he'll be able to say, so like of the responses all from the Hispanic chamber, let's say, so if we're looking at our Latinx kind of business owners, how is it more nuanced? So he'll be doing that analysis as well. So I think that'll add to it being satisfactory. So if you think about targeting specific groups, it's not necessarily washed in with others, and so the responses can be blended. So it helps to see the aggregate just to get a full picture. But if you want to target more specific groups, CJ will provide that analysis further to say, well, this is what I think a strategy should be to address this.
I was
Sarah,
just remembering, I was remembering pre-COVID when we were preparing for the census, and we were desperate to understand, because it was moving to computer, or online rather. We were desperate to understand. We knew that we had populations inside Orange County that were going to be hesitant to share that information. because of their life experiences in other countries. And so that's the genesis, or that's the core rather of my conversation. I was wondering if there was, you know, a better sampling or response we could have gotten from some communities, because we might have run into some hurdles. But you're saying that that's probably not so. So I'm satisfied with that. Last question real quick is when you asked about businesses that failed. Do we know what kinds of businesses failed? Because I'd be very interested to follow up on that.
There is, if there was provided, I gave a section of a response, just a sample one, if you will, for each of those. There were certain ones through that, even that one sample provided a little bit of insight. So if participants were willing to share that, and some did, they did provide us that information, but I'd be happy to go through and identify those and have a number associated with it that did share what businesses they were, and then a number so you can get a good reference as far as what that represented.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I saw Thrive Santana. I saw your hand up, but if there's any more comments, this will be the final, and then we will send you on your way. So go ahead.
Sure, thank you. I'm trying to gather my thoughts, but I'll try to be as concise as possible. Also, I guess a big thanks and appreciation to everyone that helped do the outreach work and the analysis work. It is a lot of work, and skilled work. I feel like the data here is providing some really great direction for the group, in certain, especially in certain questions. I for example, the one around, you know, 1 to 3 solutions for high quality jobs for the most economically disadvantaged. There was also a question, I believe, around environmental equity. And then the one that I saw right now, also, that was naming some of the sectors that could be invested in to create more high quality jobs. I think those named some, you know, some areas where the community sees a lot of talent, but not a lot of investment. So I think that those questions really provide some good direction for us. I do also feel, as you know, Thrive, we also helped implement these surveys, and I'm also aware that sometimes the questions were a little bit awkwardly worded. I'm referring more in Spanish. We did most of ours in Spanish, and we tried to help, you know, with the translation as much as we could. But even then, even with you know, some of our comments, sometimes the questions were a little bit jargony for certain community members, and could lead to kind of misleading responses. So in some of the responses, it does seem like community members might be saying like where they feel more resources are needed or more support is needed. And so just something to keep in mind as we're analyzing, you know, some of the responses. And I forgot if I was going to say something else, but I'll stop there. I guess for me, the in general, and I think we were saying this earlier in the meeting as well, it would be good to include when we, you know, present our findings and our strategies to the state, to just be straightforward and say, you know, we've done a good amount of research so far, and this is where we're at. And we also understand that more work is needed, more research and partnerships with community groups are going to be needed moving forward to continue to better understand, you know, how to develop some of these strategies.
Awesome. This is helpful. Thank you all for your contributions, your discussions, and your comments. This was super helpful and being able to share with everyone their ideas and their thoughts process surrounding the SURF session and the Catalyst funding and how we are selecting industries. So I want to dismiss everyone and let everyone get on to a great weekend. Our next meeting will be November 9th because the 10th, that's a Thursday, because the 10th is some recognize Veterans Day as the holiday and will not be working. So thank you to all those who have served. And so we will see you then. Thank you again. And again, the survey is open for a week, and let Jesse or Dr. Walward know if you have any questions. Thank you, everyone.
Before we sign off, I don't know if I'm gonna get cut off, but
yeah, Luis, I think we did. Is there not an other on there?
Could we add one?
I think we can. There's
If
no,
there
the challenge is it's like, yeah, we can
already.
try. I think the issue would then be like it needs to match, right, what the state and federal government recognizes as an industry sector. So this is why we were I guess like we try to tie it together, because at the end of the day, like that's you know, it's always that's the language they want to see in some ways. And so that's why we tried our best to make it we try to explain what a lot of these industry sectors are in the subgroups, but the primary concern would be if you like throw out something that isn't directly recognized in some of those data charts, it's like, will they recognize it? So I think we can add another, but I'm just saying that's what could be the challenge with doing that. Or maybe it already fits within. Sorry, go ahead.
It would be, I guess it would be our job afterwards to see where it, where it
would fit, right? It would ultimately fit in one already.
Because, for example, just to give an example, we were talking earlier about service sector jobs. I'm not sure where that would land, but that could be a category, for example, that maybe could be added. Just to give an example.
Yeah, well, that's where we can, I would say, email us, and before you cast your vote, I would, because at Anna's point, they wouldn't be able to see your other.
But Jesse, but those service jobs, unless I'm misunderstanding what he's saying, those are going to be headquartered under, the food services and the accommodations, entertainment. Okay.
Correct. That's why I would recommend it. If people are not sure, because you're thinking more occupation, email us and we can identify what that falls under. Because technically every sector falls under the ones listed. Or every job will somehow fall under the one listed. I understand where you may not know where. So it's best to just email so you can answer correctly, because I mean, to Anna's question, even if you selected other people would not see yours, because it's not like an iterative survey where we're constantly adding those things. It would just be a separate response that you would hope, enough people also put in that as an other, which is also different. So I would say if you're unsure, if anyone's unsure, and I'll send this in a recap email, just email us like, this is what I'm really thinking about. How can I cast my vote correctly so it applies? I think that's probably the better recommendation. And that's another reason why we want this to be a week, so not everyone's kind of pressed. So I would say for anyone, and I'll put this in the email, I would just do that, Luis, like say, hey, these are the occupations I'm thinking about, or sectors that you might know them. Help make sure, like, how can I ensure that I'm voting correctly here? And we will help you navigate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And yes, I can send that in the recap email, Nate's work as well, which is helpful. So I'll put everything in a recap email.
Thank you, Jesse.
No,
Thank you,
no
everyone.
problem. No, great questions. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.